It's my honor now to introduce somebody that is just a great leader in our community, in our region, in our state, who I'm going to have introduce a panel. We're going to do a last minute change, and we're going to actually have him moderate the panel. But I just want to introduce Tom Snyder. And we've got a great panel with Rachael and Meleney from NC RIoT, and then Richard Boyd, the founder and CEO of Tanjo, and a great, great entrepreneur in North Carolina. Tom Snyder is the CEO of NC RIoT, and it's an organization that's doing outstanding things in the Internet of Things. He is just doing so many great things to inform governments, business leaders on the kinds of opportunities out there for us to be looking at, and the kinds of jobs we could be creating, and how we can come together and collaborate as a community for pandemics like this and other crises that may emerge. In the interest of time, I'm going to hand it over to Tom. I want to thank him for his leadership that he provides to our tech community, to our innovation community. And he's really, really doing great stuff as a leader. And we're honored that he took time out of his busy schedule to join us. So I hand it over now to you, Tom. And thank you for all the great work you're doing at NC RIoT.
All right, thank you very much, Steve, and thanks, Mark and Keith, and everybody working behind the scenes to put this on today. Really glad to be a part of this. As Steve mentioned, I lead the RIoT organization. We have one of our team members, Rachael Newberry, on the panel, so I'll let her talk about RIoT here in just a moment. But really glad to be here, supporting entrepreneurship in the area. A lot of the things that David said really resonate. I do think that this is a great opportunity to find the silver linings in a crisis and to create opportunities. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that through this panel. Our panelists can introduce themselves better than I can myself. So maybe I'll hand to you, Rachael, to give an introduction to yourself and your organization, and then we'll pass it over to Richard.
Thanks, Tom. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rachael Newberry. I am the program director at RIoT. If you're not familiar with RIoT, at a high level, we're an economic development organization focused on sector growth in the Internet of Things. So we support businesses large and small with taking advantage of the opportunities that the technology evolutions present. Specifically for RIoT, I run our innovation programs. So certainly the RIoT Accelerator program is our most intensive way that we support early stage startups. And then we recently launched an innovation program called Mission R around COVID-19 challenges. And briefly, my background is in startup support and building programs. Previous to RIoT, I was at Duke University, where I launched a behavioral science focused startup accelerator. So glad to be here today.
Great, thanks for being here, Rachael. Richard, give us a sense of who you are and tell us a little bit about Tanjo.
Sure, good afternoon, and thanks for the opportunity today. Yeah, so I guess I'm a serial entrepreneur here in North Carolina. Currently, I guess you could call me a parallel entrepreneur, since I have two startups, which I don't necessarily recommend during a pandemic, by the way. I've known David Gardner for quite some time. I really appreciated all of his thoughts. And, those of you who know me know that my co-founder, David Smith, and I have, I think we have 6 different companies we've made here in North Carolina. We've become reasonably adept at attracting capital and building businesses here. The most notable is the Red Storm Entertainment that we started with the author Tom Clancy. We did game companies with Michael Crichton, with Ozzy Osbourne, with science fiction writer Douglas Adams, all based right here in North Carolina. The last company, I was just thinking about this as David was talking, my last startup that actually got funded by Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn. I started in 2001, right after September 11th, because I was angry like many of us were. And I was thinking, how do we pull our resources together to address the specific problems of that time? So I created a company that ended up getting bought by Lockheed Martin. As luck would have it, in 2007, right before that little set of crises in 2008. So we were very fortunate there. But, I think as part of that, we've designed Tanjo, our machine learning company that I'm also the CEO of, to be resilient by design. So we have a small team of very smart people we've worked with for a long time, but we work with great partners, both here in North Carolina, like we work with Michael Levy and the DHIT group on our healthcare work. We're doing work with the DOD, with the Department of Defense today, with NCI, which is sort of a mid-sized Beltway bandit up in DC that we work with closely. So I'm looking forward to talking about some of those resilience ideas for those of you who are pondering or already underway with your startup, and please do keep them in North Carolina because it's getting better.
Great. Well, thank you for being here, Richard. Maybe we'll stay with you as we kick this off. As we were talking about pulling this panel together, RIoT is of the belief that new opportunity, new jobs, new companies really start at the forefront of technology. And you've been a technologist really your entire career. Give us a little bit of view of the intersection of kind of emerging technology and how it meets opportunity like you just described.
Yeah, I think I've been talking about this with colleagues of mine, people like Reid Hoffman and Joey Ito and others for the last couple of months. And, Alan Kay too, for you guys who know, Alan was the guy at Xerox PARC who invented the first laptop computer, the mouse and Windows interface we're still using today. But really, it depends on where you're standing. I mean, we call these technologies emerging, but I think what happens in inflection points in history like this is all of us who are working in invention of technology have these sort of ready-made, these shovel-ready ideas who, we're at a point of frustration, like why aren't people adopting AI in every single company? Why aren't people using simulation? Why aren't we doing 3D printing and drone delivery for Amazon? All these great ideas who, that have been sort of worked on for years. And then finally you get a crisis like this where, to be honest, many people like us start saying, now's our opportunity, right? Because we do have that sort of Schumpeter creative destruction opportunity to sort of take out a clean sheet of paper, look at first principles. And, I just got off a call with Wake Tech where I'm on the board of trustees looking at, what kind of people do we need to make on the other side of this? That's the point of education. Like, what is the purpose of education? How do we get information out of instructors' minds into students' minds, without letting them actually be in the same space together? But we've got lots of great ideas, and now's the time to implement them.
Yeah, I really like the point you made about shovel-ready projects and things that are already in the works. I mean, just as David described in ordering groceries from home, right? This is technology that existed, but the market maybe was not yet there, or we were only at the early adopters. The simple fact is markets have completely changed. The idea of a new normal or going back to an old normal, the fact is markets have changed. And David talked about that a little bit in his opening. Rachael, you work with early stage companies predominantly, and also with large corporate partners. But how are you seeing the entrepreneurial community kind of shift to the new market normal, or are you seeing that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think at RIoT, we're seeing a lot of the trends that David mentioned, and the startups that are ultimately going to be successful are, of course, the strong teams, but the ones that continue to solve real problems and are able to adapt to not only a pandemic climate, but market trends that will continue to evolve for the life of their business. So I'd like to bring one startup to the forefront that's doing a really great job. It's a company called Shift Auto, based in Greenville. They're part of our current cohort of the Accelerator program. And they were really starting to go to market as the pandemic hit, but have continued to hit the sales trail. They have a solution that helps car dealerships to adopt a pickup and drop off service so that patrons can continue to get their car serviced without leaving home. So they were in a situation where they already provided this naturally socially distanced solution. And they were hesitant to kind of be opportunistic about the current climate, but we encourage them that they are helping these car dealerships not only to stay in business, but to acquire new customers and create kind of new streams of revenue and increase their business over the long term, not just during this pandemic. So that's an example of a company that had a great value proposition for the current times, but has just continued to adapt the way that they're selling. And I think that's what all startups to some degree have to do, is just look at the current market, figure out how their solution fits and how it solves problems that people are experiencing now, and be able to adapt to survive.
So this is a period where no matter where you are in your journey, you really need to be refocusing again on customer discovery, it sounds like.
Yeah, customer discovery always. We preach that for the life of the business. You always have to be engaging with your market, talking with stakeholders, and understanding what their problems are so that you're solving them in a relevant way.
Yeah. So Richard, you have both, enterprise and government clients that you've worked with over the years. How do you navigate sometimes that, listening and teasing out the product needs, while at the same time, helping people to think more forwardly about adopting technology? It's kind of this tension between a market pull that might be asking for what we used to do versus a technology push to what we really should be doing.
Yeah, well, I think what David said about the opportunity with some of these enterprise customers, and certainly with government, is something we're actually seeing in real time happen. We've been more busy on the sales side with our business in the last 3 or 4 weeks than we have been in several years because I think people who have been pondering some of these more disruptive technology ideas all of a sudden look at it and say, the time has come to do that. And and the other thing we've been feeling a little bit guilty about, like many of you who are working in software may also feel the same way, that there's almost no disruption to our ability to produce. Concerned initially about, are people going to delay decisions for implementing new programs, especially if it's something that has to be on premise. And very often when we do a brand new machine learning brain for somebody, like we did at RTI, or we're doing for the community colleges or elsewhere, it's very often we say, look, machine learning and AI are very intimate and powerful, therefore they should be on premise inside your firewall. So that's been somewhat disruptive. But what we're seeing now is more people wanting, even government customers, even military customers, saying, hey, we'll just go to the cloud, we'll implement it that way. You don't need to be here in person, and we'll actually waive some of those authority to operate rules even about how do we implement new enterprise software to achieve some of these objectives we have. So the number of RFPs coming out of I saw a really interesting one last week from the IRS, by the way, to build essentially Sim City for the United States. So they want little sim versions of all of us. And then, at least the stated objective is to look at, how do I design products and services that'll make everybody feel better about how they actually file their taxes. There's all kinds of other opportunities there as well that you can conjure up in your head. But seeing that kind of design thinking and creativity out of these organizations is encouraging, and we're having to respond quickly to meet those demands.
Very, very cool. So on that simulation front, maybe this would be a good opportunity to talk briefly about what Tanjo does, and then also I'm interested in your perspectives on when people think about AI. Obviously, that's driving a lot of automation. It affects jobs, affects the economy. You talk frequently about using technology to augment what we do as humans versus just simply to replace. Maybe you can hit on both of those topics if you would.
Yeah, I think that's a core thesis behind the business. I mean, we started working when I was still at Lockheed Martin in 2009. That's when I finally discovered how far machine learning had really come, and realized that it was a new button on the calculator, that it was a whole new set of skills that we could apply to problems we'd been admiring for quite some time. So I wrote about this in TechCrunch, I think in 2014 or 15, that it really, the real issue for the 21st century is, how do you achieve the right balance between humans and machines to optimize outcomes? And that's both with effort and attention. And I think every organization now, and it's becoming more poignant now, really needs to think that through. Look at every activity that you're doing, whether you're a community college, you're a bank, you're an enterprise business, or you're a startup. Think, should a human be doing that effort, or should it be a human be using their attention to monitor or analyze that thing, or is that something I can automate? Now, that's what most people think about is just the automation portion of it, but AI goes a lot deeper than that. We often talk about this idea of the new scientific method, in that, if you're operating a business and you've got the human perspective, human analysis as part of the work that you're doing, we're finding a new thing, which is turn all the information over to the machine system, have it provide its weird and unique insight, and let that help you with your decision making. So going from just sort of big data and data driven, which is most people are talking about today, and now going to more AI enabled. And I do say enabled because I do think the successful organizations will have humans working fluently and fluidly with some kind of machine system in a comfortable way that's got a great workflow that is achieving outcomes quicker.
So Rachael, you're focused on Internet of Things and data, and for years people said everything's about data. That's not exactly true. It's really about the insights and the actions and the things that come out of data when you analyze it and search it. Talk to us a little bit about kind of how are companies doing that? Do you agree with what Richard said? Do you have a different view on that? And where are we most seeing data getting utilized today in our current situation?
Yeah, great question. So I do agree with Richard. I think there's great potential for companies to be using AI to automate some of their processes, and that's kind of just an effort towards building a more scalable, more efficient business. And then the power of data to eventually get us to a point where we're gleaning intelligence from that data, and processes are being automated and optimized and so on. That's serving an end customer better and solving a problem in a quick way, but in a way that can't be done just based on human power itself. But I agree with Richard as well that it needs great human oversight, and where can technology and human interaction work together. A lot of the startups that we work with are looking at just how to better curate the data sets that they collect towards future AI and ML solutions that serve the needs of their customers better. So I think that we're seeing startups grasp even more and more all the time just the value of data, and looking at again, that first business principle of how do you solve a real problem based on the data set that they can collect.
Yeah. So stepping aside from maybe a little bit on the technology side of discussion, we heard moments ago a discussion of, what should a founder be doing, and not to give up on the sales effort right now, not to give up on marketing. What are other things that you are advising startups to do, Rachael, to kind of weather this storm and to find opportunities within it?
Yeah. So I think David made some great points earlier about, first, how do you continue to generate revenue, continue to beat the sales path, continue to fill the top of the funnel? I think that's certainly something we're advising as well. How do you optimize costs so that you're not spending superfluously during this time? But really broadly, we're just advising people that we're entering into this a new reality. We're not going to just go back to normal. I think businesses now are experimenting in a lot of ways, not just with remote work, but how to meet customer needs in different ways. And that's not going to just snap back to the way that things were. So generally, we're advising that the startups that continue to push business forward, to find relevant problems to solve, and innovate in new ways, those are the ones that are going to be successful in the long term.
That's interesting. So, kind of hitting pause, controlling costs, and sheltering in place is maybe not exactly
right. That's not the right move.
Yeah, absolutely. So, are there areas, Richard, that you think, or technologies that you see as having the highest potential of creating positive outcomes as we move into our new reality?
Well, I think the first step that, and my organization's always been really good at this idea of scenario planning, like envisioning futures and sort of trying to think, if certain things become true, if certain trends persist, like Moore's law, and if we are all going to be working remotely from each other and we need to do business that way, and there aren't going to be conferences we normally depend on, then what does the world look like at that time, and what will the world need? And sort of build backwards to what kind of technologies should we be thinking about, like becoming really adept at sessions like this, and what other tools can we put in here. I'm reminded of, after September 11th, we thought the same thing was going to happen. And I don't know if this is going to happen again, but I remember tracking that to about 9 months. So only for about 9 months did we have this sort of shelter in place thing. And after 9 months, everything pretty much went back to normal. But my team had built a 3D collaborative environment for doing, and I know David Gardner was playing with some of those technologies back then as well, around doing like 3D conferences, and how do you actually let people share 3D game spaces using massive multiplayer online game engines. And so we envisioned that people would want to do that, and I don't think we ever really got all the friction points out of that technology to make it really comfortable. So maybe that's why it didn't happen, but everything really did go back to normal. But I do think what's more likely to happen is that a lot of these trends we're already seeing about increasing autonomy, autonomous systems, increasing intelligence amplification, where you realize a standalone human being for many tasks, including accounting and being a lawyer and all sorts of tasks, it's insufficient to be a standalone human being, not augmented by some kind of AI decision support and analysis support that's speeding up the OODA loop cycles for you. That's just going to be that's something we already knew was happening. This is just going to speed it up.
Yeah. Without question, we're seeing an acceleration of things through this crisis. So I think we're at about the end of our time. I want to ask each of you kind of one quick parting question, maybe in 30 seconds or less. What has you most optimistic right now, despite all the challenges that we have in front of us? And Richard, let's start with you.
Well, I hate to be repetitive, but I think it's really just all those great, wonderful, shovel-ready ideas. Like, back during the Obama administration, we were talking about an IARPA for education and trying to create that, the equivalent of DARPA, but do it for education. That got scuttled, of course, but I think revisiting that's something we really should be doing. Autonomous vehicles, decision support systems in healthcare. I mean, the healthcare, this pandemic situation has really shined a glaring light on all of the inequity and inefficiency and problems we have in a healthcare system with 7,500 different hospitals, 7,500 different potentially standards of care and best practices. And we really need to have something more integrated with better data reporting. Right after I started, right after this situation started, I joined a group called FINO, which is Failure is Not an Option. I heard someone else say that. I think it was Steve. There's a group of data scientists and people around the country from various universities, et cetera. And we said, let's get all the data really quick. And we came back, within a week going like, this is awful and unacceptable. The fact that we can't get data. You cannot get good data. And I was on a meeting this morning where I found out that even there are states in this country right now who are deliberately misreporting death data and infection rate data for political reasons. And therefore we can't make good data-driven, simulation models of what to do and make good decisions because we can't get the data. So, but I'm optimistic now that all of this has been revealed. It's not a technology problem, it's a policy problem. So let's go get all this tech together that we already know works, and let's put it together with the will and the power and the political process to make it happen. That's what I'm optimistic about.
All right, thank you, Richard. Parting shot for you as well, Rachael?
Yeah, so I think I'm most optimistic about the combination of new innovation opportunity and the urgency with which founders are working. So we see this in our, where RIot's working with 6 innovation projects with Mission R, all related to COVID-19 challenges. And those projects are moving along so quickly. They're eager to fill the needs of the community right now. And one example, COVID Mobilized launched a resource matching platform in 2 weeks, and that's live now. So yeah, I think it's an exciting time for entrepreneurship, a challenging time, but there's a lot of opportunity, and founders are hungry.
Great. Well, thank you both for joining us today, and I'm going to hand it back to you, Steve.